All right, so moving on to the next story that we have here. It is now time that we are going to be entering into the realm of controversies. Oh, yes, it is now time that we are going to be getting into the real interesting parts where the internet is just going nuts over. And it is now time that for this podcast to go and talk about a specific subject that has feared the most upon people, what they are freaking out about so much. The two infamous words that strike fear upon internet dwellers: cancel culture. And in terms of cancel culture, we have heard so many things lately that have been getting canceled. Rather it be people freaking out over the Muppets getting canceled, or Mr. Potato Head getting canceled. But when you actually do look into it, they're not necessarily that canceled per se. You could still watch you could still watch the Muppet Show on Disney Plus. It's just that there are a few episodes that would have a 10-second content warning before actually starting the episode, which the grand majority of them are pretty much uncut and in their true form. And then there's also Mr. Potato Head being canceled, but they're actually not, because you can actually go into a store and you can buy yourself Mr. Potato Head. But the only difference is that now Hasbro ultimately decided to change up the franchise, where now it's more gender neutral, and now it is being referred to as the Potato Head franchise. Oh, but those are just appetizers apparently, because this is something else, however, that people to this day are still freaking out about. And what I am discussing about, of course, is none other than Dr. Seuss. Yes, what happened this week is regarding the fact that you may have heard people freaking out over the fact that people are stating that Dr. Seuss is getting canceled. Cancel culture is going after Dr. Seuss. It could be the end of Dr. Seuss, but we won't let cancel culture take away Dr. Seuss. That is not what happened, however. That could not even be further from the truth. What happened was actually that Dr. Seuss Enterprise, the company that pretty much is running all the Dr. Seuss books and is in charge of releasing all these different Dr. Seuss books and making sure the legacy of Dr. Seuss is still alive, they decided to go and no longer publish 6 different Dr. Seuss books. These include And to Think That I Saw It on Mulberry Street, If I Ran the Zoo, Mr. Elligott's Pool, On Beyond Zebra, Scrambled Egg Super, and The Cat's Quizzer. And the reason for why those are getting canceled is mainly because of the fact that these books are, how can I put this, outdated. There are certain pages in these books that do have some racist imagery, rather it be racist depictions of black people or racist depictions of Asians, specifically Chinese or Japanese and stuff like that. Even the Dr. Seuss Enterprises themselves even stated that these books portray in ways that are hurtful and wrong. Ceasing sales of these books is only part of our commitment and our broader plan to ensure Dr. Seuss Enterprises catalog represents and supports all communities and families. And by the way, I am reading this through my source on ABC News. However, this kind of reaction just immediately went out of hand. You'd think it would seem harmless that they're just no longer publishing it, but the internet just went absolutely bonkers and are losing their crap over the fact that there are some Dr. Seuss books that are no longer being published, or in some people's terms, that are getting canceled per se. And that's why people are interpreting this as either getting canceled or getting banned or anything like that. And immediately, this is really a case of a mountain turned into a molehill to the point where people are just panicking over the subject of Dr. Seuss. And even right now, you can actually find on websites like Amazon and stuff like that, where the sales of Dr. Seuss books just completely skyrocketed. And I'm not necessarily referring to the ones that are stated to be no longer published, but whatever Dr. Seuss book they could actually find, even like the most popular ones like The Cat in the Hat, The Grinch, Green Eggs and Ham, One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish, any of those, and they are immediately trying to go and drive up sales. And that's currently where we are right now, where the internet is at a complete flame war and in a complete state of paranoia, fearing that Dr. Seuss would be canceled, and they're ensuring to keep the legacy of Dr. Seuss alive by buying all their books, by singing their praises and all that kind of stuff. That's currently the crazy situation that we are at with these Dr. Seuss books. All right, now before we fully dive into this subject, let's look into the big picture. What is it that Dr. Seuss Enterprises has done? What is it that they did? Well, they ultimately decided to no longer publish 6 different Dr. Seuss books. 6 books that are not necessarily Dr. Seuss's most well-known books that he has ever published. Probably the most popular of the bunch is If I Ran the Zoo. I think it is safe to say that anyone listening to this podcast, or anyone on the internet, or the grand majority of people on the internet, unless you're like a major Dr. Seuss fanboy, no, you probably have never even heard of at least half of these books. I don't think there is a single person out there who is massively upset about this news because they're no longer able to go and buy On Beyond Zebra or Scrambled Egg Super because it has some racist imagery in those books in particular. And from there, on top of that, no longer publishing these books do not necessarily mean that they are banned, that they are canceled per se. That doesn't mean that at all. What it means is that Dr. Seuss Enterprises decided that they're no longer going to go and make new books out of them. They're no longer going to be releasing new issues of books like Mulberry Street or If I Ran the Zoo. Technically, you could still go on eBay and you can actually buy the book, but then again, I highly encourage not to do so because they're going at ridiculous they're going for ridiculous prices right now. Unless you are willing to go and buy Scrambled Egg Super for $200, I advise you not to go and do so. That, or you can actually go to your public library, and chances are they would actually have one of those books. They could actually have a copy of And to Think I Saw It on Mulberry Street, and you could still go pick it up the same. That's really the big difference here, is that you could still go find it. And not to mention, by the way, you could still go on the internet, and chances are, if you do your research correct, you can actually go and find a digital copy for free that's on the internet that you can actually go and look up for something like Mulberry Street or McGilligan's Pool or Scrambled Egg Super. You can actually go and actually look it up. So technically, there's nothing too big that is lost here. And I wouldn't be surprised if this decision is actually done because, of course, like we all know why they would go and decide to not publish these books is because they want to go and reflect upon the current times. And it's pretty much to say that they do acknowledge that these racist imageries are absolutely terrible and should not be exposed to young, impressionable children. So they did do the right thing on that. But, fudge nabbit, what am I trying to say with this? Yeah, but, oh yes, like, not only is it because, like, they know it is the right thing to do in order to stay within the current times, but at the same time, they're not really that popular. I think it's more of a marketing decision because these books aren't really selling all that much in the first place. As I said before, these are not really that popular books in the first place. You know, you're not going to see people crying over the fact that they can no longer buy The Cat's Quizzer or On Beyond Zebra. These are books that aren't really necessarily getting as much sales as something like Green Eggs and Ham or The Cat in the Hat, so it's something that is worth sacrificing and that they wouldn't necessarily lose that much money if they decide to go and no longer publish these books. It's ultimately a decision to go and maintain, it's ultimately a decision that they could afford to go and sacrifice. So it's a bit of a win-win situation that they're not really losing much by sacrificing the publishing of their lesser known books, and they don't have to worry about having racist depictions onto their books that Dr. Seuss has done in the past. And then there is also the discussion about Dr. Seuss himself, because that is currently the big discussion that people are currently having right now, considering that these books are no longer being published because of the racist imageries that are in those individual books. The big question has been raised regarding if Dr. Seuss himself is considered to be racist. Because if he's perfectly fine with drawing these racist depictions of black people or Asian people onto his books, does that reflect upon the man himself? Is Dr. Seuss racist? And the answer is yes and no. Dr. Seuss himself is not necessarily racist, but at the same time, it's mostly, he's just a product of his time. I think that's the best way to put it. This is a man who was raised in the early 1900s, and throughout the 20th century, he would go and create some books. And early in his lifetime, when he would be starting in his career, of course he would go and make a lot of racist imagery because it was very commonplace back then. It was actually quite regular to see these kinds of depictions and how normalized that they all are. And I actually do have a few examples that you can go and check out. You could just look it up online of any racist caricatures that Dr. Seuss has done, and you'll find like a really massive handful. I actually do have a website here called adayinourshoes.com, where it does discuss about the subject of Dr. Seuss being racist. And there are some caricatures that he has done. Like, here's one example where we see Dr. Seuss, where it's like a little comic that he has made where, like, you see people working in this, like, little shop and just looking around. And then, like, in the last panel, you just see, ooh, what what is this? Oh, God. Oh, dear. Oh, God. Oh, no. Oh, God. Is that the N-word? No, Doc. No, come on, Theodore. What are you doing? What are you doing with this? What the fridge is this? No, man, no. And then there's also another example. That's just a black example of the racist caricatures that Dr. Seuss has done. But when it comes to Asians, oh man, did Dr. Seuss hit them hard. If there is one specific race that Dr. Seuss did dirty the most, it's easily the Asians. Like, look at this. Look at this. You got this one Asian guy giving all the other Asians the honorable fifth column, and it's just a bunch of bricks that say TNT. And it says, and apparently up there it says, waiting for the signal from home. Like, this is yikes. This is a massive lineup of just freaking yikes. And there is actually a very specific reason, and this is not the only example. Like, you also see another one here of, here's another, like, this is a World War II ad. What have you done today to help save your country? And here you have Hitler, and then you have the Japanese leader from back then, of course, as a racist stereotype. And there is actually a very deep history with that one in particular, and there is a reason why Dr. Seuss really went hard on the Asians. And one thing that I need to start off by saying is that Dr. Seuss is very much anti-fascist. The conservatives of today would despise Theodor Geisel because this dude is unapologetically Antifa. And Dr. Seuss, you probably know, he would do everything he can in order to go and fight off the Nazis and call out anyone who would be considered America first. In fact, if you actually do look into his political cartoons of the past, if you do look at his political cartoons during World War II, like, he would not be afraid to go and call out anybody who uses the term America first. Like, any America firsters out there, they're pretty much as bad as Nazis. That is pretty much his mentality, and that is the way that he framed it in his cartoons. So, of course, as someone who is completely anti-fascist, of course he would be completely against the Japanese. And the way that he would do so is with his cartoons. And there are definitely plenty of cartoons that he would use to go and fight off against the Japanese, especially when they were considered to be a major enemy after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. But then, even he acknowledged that the way that he depicted the Japanese and Asians in general, that he even took it way too far, where even during World War II, he had to apologize for going way too far with the racist depictions that he has done, and he had to go and scale it back a little bit by the end of World War II. In fact, he like, even afterwards, I believe in the early 1950s or in the late 1940s, he even had to go into a trip to Japan, not necessarily because of like as like punishment or as like some kind of like way as a way to put scrutiny onto Dr. Seuss or like a punishment for his racist depictions, but rather he wanted to do it himself as a way to apologize to his conscience for the way he treated the Japanese dirty. But unfortunately, it's not necessarily because of the racism of Dr. Seuss. That's not the case at all. I agree when people say that Dr. Seuss is not a racist person. It's unfortunately how things were at the time, and especially during World War II and even afterwards, the way white Americans view the Japanese is just despicable. It's just flat out terrible. And the way that they treated the Japanese is debatably even worse than the way the Japanese treated Americans during World War II. Yeah, say what you will about Pearl Harbor, that is a tragedy, but keep in mind that it is the United States that is actually responsible for the bombing of Hiroshima that killed over 100,000 people in the country. Much more, debatably 50 times more than how many people died during the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And it's not just with Dr. Seuss. Like, you can even look into cartoons as well with the way that they depicted Japanese, and they just do them dirty. Rather it be Disney with Fleischer, or especially frickin' Warner Brothers. My God, are they are guilty as hell. There's even one cartoon, I believe it's called Bugs Bunny Japs the Jap or something like that. And my God, they debatably went way too far. There was even one point where Bugs Bunny was like selling ice cream that technically it's a bomb disguised as an ice cream in order to take down the Japanese. And Bugs Bunny was just handing it to the Japanese. Yeah, no, okay. The cartoon is called Bugs Bunny Nips the Nips. Yeah, thank you so much, PPG Caitlin. And when he was handing over those bombs, like, Bugs Bunny was just like ruthless at that point. He was just like, yeah, here you go, monkey face. Here you go, slant eyes. Here you go, squinty. It's like, Jesus Christ, Bugs. That's just wow. Like, that's just way too far. Even during that time, that's just insane, dude. It's just it's just flat out terrible. So it's not just Dr. Seuss. It's just it's really the culture of back then that is actually considered very racist. It was very commonplace, and that's why, unfortunately, they do find themselves in books such as Mulberry Street and If I Ran the Zoo and on Beyond Zebra. That's how they do find themselves in those books, is because that's how people view people of color back then, unfortunately. But then again, Dr. Seuss did acknowledge that those racist stereotypes were wrong, and even he actually would go and release updated versions of those books where the harshness that he went on to those people of color, where he would try to go and soften the blow, per se, that it wouldn't seem as racist as they would be back in like the 40s and the 30s and stuff like that. So even Dr. Seuss himself would go and actually make some updates so that they wouldn't be as racist as they were before, and that they would reflect the current times in the way that people view Asians and black people. And I know I know it's pretty bad. Especially, it might sound terrible to sound like speaking for the dead and stuff like that. But I would even say, if Dr. Seuss were alive today, I think he would honestly do the same thing, and he would agree to this decision. That he would agree to stop publishing these books altogether. Or worst case scenario, he would go and update them so that they wouldn't have those racist depictions of Asians and black people and stuff like that. So I think honestly, yeah, like I'm definitely on the side of Dr. Seuss Enterprises, where they would go and do that decision, because it definitely does reflect upon the philosophies that Theodore Geisel himself would actually have. He does it. He knows that the racist depictions of back then were wrong, and that even the way he approached them were wrong. So he would go and do his best to try to fix them up in order for his books to be as universally accepted as possible, and to reflect upon the current times as well. But then I gotta say, the reactions of this, oh my god. The reactions of how people are responding to this whole thing. So, with all that said, this is honestly why I feel like it has gone completely out of hand, because you can definitely tell that these people that are just panicking over cancel culture and just impulse buying all these Dr. Seuss books, that they haven't done their research. They don't actually know the facts of what is actually going on. And also, before I would go and continue, I just need to go and ask one question. I really want to know if there's anyone out there who actually seen themselves regarding these allegations, if they're actually true or not. Is there anybody out there, is there anyone in the chat wall, or if you could write down in the comments, have you ever seen specifically, have you ever seen firsthand someone on social media demanding for the cancellation of Dr. Seuss? Because you probably have heard people trying to say that there are SJWs or liberals or Democrats that are desperately trying to go and cancel Dr. Seuss. But have you actually seen someone yourself actually specifically saying these words, that Dr. Seuss, it needs to be canceled because of his racist depictions? Okay, so no. Okay, most of these people. Okay, so one person apparently says yes. Apparently, let's see. Even roll doll. Apparently, okay, so there are a few people, but from what I see so far, the grand majority is saying, okay, so yeah, it looks like the grand majority. Okay, the one, yeah, Jonathan, you, specifically, you said that you heard, apparently there is one person who is demanding for Dr. Seuss to be canceled. Can you explain who is it? I just want to know, because for me, I've tried to look it up. I tried looking everywhere on like Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that, and never once did I actually see someone actually say that Dr. Seuss needs to be canceled. And by the way, just one more thing I want to state. One thing that does not count, by the way, is people pointing out the racism of Dr. Seuss. Just because they're pointing out his racism, that doesn't mean they're canceling him. Criticism does not mean cancellation. Because, like, that's a completely different thing right there. Because I've definitely seen a good amount of people that are pointing out Dr. Seuss's not Dr. Seuss's cancellation, but I have seen people pointing out his racism, and that many of the depictions on those books are completely wrong, but they have never stated that Dr. Seuss needs to be canceled altogether because of this. So let's see. Someone says, maybe on Twitter, but I don't go that deep on the website. No one should ever go that deep on the website. Let's see. Excuse me. So anyone? I'm still waiting on that answer. It's some guy who read Green Eggs and Ham. It's some guy, but I don't, but again, like, I haven't really seen them myself. I haven't seen any form of evidence that actually specified that there are people out there. Maybe there is like that really, really tiny maybe there is that like extremely tiny minority, like maybe like 5 people on Twitter, or maybe some trolls saying that they want to see Dr. Seuss canceled. But I've never seen it trending where there's a massive rally group or people protesting for the cancellation of Dr. Seuss specifically. I still consider that to be a bit of a myth. So honestly, it's just ridiculous to see this kind of paranoia where people, yeah, some mom and teacher said he needed to be canceled. Yeah, but that's the thing. That's just some mom and a teacher. You don't know necessarily who these people are. It's not someone of massive influence that can go and rally up his base and use his platform or use their platform prominently to say that Dr. Seuss needs to be canceled. Like I said, maybe there are like that small handful of insignificant random nobodies that are saying he should be canceled, but never in the scope that conservatives are framing it, that Democrats or Joe Biden or liberals or SJWs all want Dr. Seuss to be canceled. That's pretty much a bit of a myth right there. Yes, it's wait, hold on a sec. Kevin McCarthy? You mean the GOP minority House leader? That guy's demanding to be canceled? I don't know, that's honestly kind of crazy, but really, that's honestly a bit of a shock. But you get what I mean, though. That the whole point that I am trying to make with all this is that, again, this is all making a mountain out of a molehill, and it's all just speculation based on things that people hear. Because there are no large groups of liberals or SJWs that are demanding for the cancellation of the Cat in the Hat or for Dr. Seuss in general. And it's ridiculous the way that right now we are seeing these large groups of people that are trying to use Dr. Seuss as a weapon to fight against cancel culture. That in order to combat cancel culture, you gotta go and consume as many Dr. Seuss books as possible. That you gotta go and buy the Cat in the Hat, you gotta keep them relevant, you gotta buy Green Eggs and Ham, you gotta buy all the books possible in order to fight against cancel culture to make sure nothing else gets canceled again. It's ridiculous the way that they are approaching this. And you know the biggest irony of this? The biggest irony of the fact that you can honestly tell that these people have no idea what cancel culture is in the first place is the fact that what they are essentially doing is rewarding Dr. Seuss Enterprises for that decision that they consider to be cancel culture. Yes, what I am saying is that conservatives are rewarding cancel culture for something that they don't want for cancel culture to affect or to happen. Because really think about this. What is their reaction what is their response of the fact that there are a few Dr. Seuss books that they've most likely never heard of that are no longer being published? They're going out of their way to really inflate their consumerism and just buy Dr. Seuss books. And like the grand majority of them right now, they're not even the ones that are not on this list. It's the popular ones like Grinch, Cat in the Hat, Green Eggs and Ham, and all that kind of stuff. Then right now, they're at the point where like a good chunk of the Dr. Seuss books are actually among the best sellers right now on websites like Amazon. And like the grand majority of them are not even the ones that are even canceled. And yet they're saying that reading stuff like Cat in the Hat is a way to fight against cancel culture. Like a Dr. Seuss book a day keeps the cancel culture away. And yet, the thing that they are doing is that they're basically throwing their money towards Dr. Seuss Enterprises for a decision that they made. It was their choice. They were not forced by liberals or SJWs or whatever. It was their own decision that they have done themselves in order to stay in order to keep up with the current times, in order to keep up with the modern viewpoints of people of color, and to reflect upon their views on racism, that technically they are people who do support people of color, that they are fighters of equality, and they are, in a way, or as in a way you could say, Black Lives Matter members, that they are taking away racist depictions of black people in order to be more accepting for black people to come in and read their books comfortably. It's their decision, and yet they're being rewarded for it by the people who hated that decision in the first place. That would be the equivalent, like back in the time when Gina Carano was fired from The Mandalorian and from Lucasfilm altogether. The way that the conservatives and Gina Carano fans, the way they would respond would be like if they would go and tell people to buy Disney Plus, to go and watch as many Star Wars content as possible, and to go as buy as much Star Wars merchandise possible as a way to deflect cancel culture. And ultimately, all they're doing is just basically throwing Disney and Lucasfilm their money because of their decision of firing Gina Carano. That would be like the same kind of situation that they are doing right now with the Cat in the Hat. And overall, I personally feel like this whole Cat in the Hat situation really does reflect upon the fact that cancel culture has really become a serious problem, but not in the way that you may think. It's more of an issue because of how cancel culture is pretty much like the modern version of The Sky is Falling from Chicken Little. They can scream around cancel culture, but all it is just a stupid acorn that landed on their head and really blowing things out of proportion and making people panic for what is essentially nothing. And I could say this right now, that like these people who are saying that this is cancel culture in terms of Dr. Seuss and stuff like that, this really is a major reason why many people nowadays don't even believe cancel culture exists, because conservatives have no idea what cancel culture is. It really does feel like it keeps on changing the definition. And nowadays, I think I already said this before, but it really does feel like almost every other day there's just something that these people are freaking out that is getting canceled. Like The Muppet Show, for example. Is that getting canceled? No, you could still watch it on Disney Plus. It's just that it has a 10-second content warning before a few episodes, and apparently that is considered cancel culture. What about Mr. Potato Head? No, that is not cancel culture, because you could still buy some potato heads right there. It's just that they decided to change their brand name so that it's more gender neutral. And with Dr. Seuss, is that getting canceled? No, you could still buy all the books you want. It's just that there are a handful of them that are no longer going to be available in terms of new issues that are out in the market anymore. You could still rent them in the library. You could still buy them off on eBay. But it's just that there won't be new copies of those books anymore. And even nowadays, like I'm starting to hear, like today, just before starting this podcast, I actually heard that apparently these same people are freaking out that there might be a chance that Pepe Le Pew might be canceled because of a New York Times article criticizing Pepe Le Pew. It really is ridiculous with the way that cancel culture seems to constantly be changing its definition. And this is why people can't really take the term cancel culture seriously. And it has really become this boy who cried wolf scenario. And you know what this is overall? Like this whole scenario, like, I'm trying to find, like, some kind of logic or reason to this whole thing, to this mass pariah of cancel culture and Dr. Seuss. And you know what this is? This is nothing more but a distraction. It really is. It's to distract people from the real problems that are happening in the world, and it's a distraction from conservative pundits like Ben Shapiro and Fox News and what have you. It's all a distraction from them, from the reality of how Republican politicians are so incompetent at their jobs that they cannot do anything correct, and that they are the enemy of the people. It's not the press, it really is these Republican politicians. The fact that they don't want anyone to have $15 an hour minimum wage. The fact that they're trying to ban that. And how ironic is it that they're saying they're against cancel culture and they're doing everything they can in order to cancel the idea of $15 an hour minimum wage. There is also the factor of the pandemic, We're still in a freaking pandemic, people, and worrying about Dr. Seuss should be the freaking least of your problems. We're still in a pandemic. We still need to wear masks. We still need to do everything we can to keep everyone safe. And yet, you got these idiots like Texas Governor Greg Abbott and a few other states that feel like even though they're not prepared whatsoever, they feel like it's safe to reopen everything 100%, which is going to be a disastrous result that could cause another spike in cases. That Joe Biden said it best, that this is nothing more but Neanderthal thinking. And especially with the way that, considering, speaking of Texas, by the way, it's already enough that Texas is already going through, they already went through one disaster, now they're going to go through another with Greg Abbott's decision. And especially the fact that it's the Democrats who are doing everything they can to make sure that all these people in Texas are safe and secure during that snowstorm, with people like Beto O'Rourke and Alexia Cortez raising millions of dollars to ensure their safety, to ensure their well-being and everything, while incompetent idiots, anti-Americans like Ted Cruz decided to go and freaking travel to Cancun during this time to run away from the problem instead of helping those people out. And that is just a handful of examples to present the incompetencies of the Republican government right there, and why it pretty much should, this is pretty much a full-on example as to why is it no Republican politician should even be allowed to even work at freaking politics, because they have no freaking idea what they're doing. They're only doing it for themselves and not for the people. It's honestly ridiculous, and this is nothing more but a distraction, especially with the fact that this is a pandemic. This whole thing about cancel culture, really, this is nothing more but paranoia. We are pretty much at a point where cancel culture is pretty much such an unhealthy thing to be obsessed over. And people who are freaking out about these things, they sound like freaking lunatics. Like, really think about it. Right now, these people who are panicking about cancel culture, they're running around screaming, "We need to stop cancel culture because they're going to take away our guns, they're going to take away our Mr. Potato Head toys, and they're going to take away our Dr. Seuss books." What kind of mentally stable human being would go and say that? It's ridiculous, man. And especially in the fact, again, I know I've said this a lot of times, but we are in a damn pandemic, yo. We're pretty much in a time where we have to, we need to prioritize what is most important. And what is most important right now, more so than a Dr. Seuss book or even the economy, is the health and well-being of others, to make sure everyone is safe and that everyone has a good system that can be strong enough in order to go and fight off against the COVID-19 virus. That's what we should be focusing on right now. Those are the real issues that we need to focus on. Not freaking Cat in the Hat, not Mr. Potato Head, not the Muppets, not Pepe Le Pew, not any of that shit right now, okay? It's not like cancel culture should be a low priority. It's nothing more but first world problems. In fact, I would even go as far and say this is nothing more but white privilege problems. That's not an issue. Yes, cancel culture can be very problematic. I agree with you there. But the conservative definition of cancel culture and the way that they are treating it, like the Boy Who Cried Wolf story, it just makes it a non-issue. They're nothing more but freaking distractions from the real problems that we need to go and resolve right now. And that's what frustrates me about this whole controversy right there. It's really such a massive example of how cancel culture is nothing more but a worthless distraction from the real issues out there, and how you got these idiot, incompetent pundits that shouldn't even be allowed to have social media in the first place, like Greg Abbott, Ben Shapiro, Fox News, and whatever, that they're all trying to distract people from the real problems that are going on in the world, that they're trying to combat it, and they know what they're doing. They know the reason why that they're upset is because they want to actually normalize racism. That Many of these people, they want racism to actually be normalized. They want racism to actually be okay. In fact, Greg Abbott, with his response to reopening Texas 100%, he's just gonna go, like, he knows that if things don't go well, he's just gonna pin the blame on immigrants and say that it's the open borders that's the problem, not the fact that he opened everything 100%. Because especially for American conservatives that still support Donald Trump and still have that mentality, it's much easier to be racist and xenophobic than it is to put a piece of cloth on their face. So overall, this is ridiculous. It really is. It's such a non-issue that they're desperately trying to make a big deal in order to distract people from actually doing the right thing, to actually focus on the real issues. And yet they know that Republican politicians are incapable of doing that, so all they can do is just make stuff up, turn a non-issue into an issue, and try to make cancel culture look like some kind of evil conspiracy. And that's nothing more. It's nothing but this dumb QAnon type conspiracy theory. And that's all it is, really. Like, for me personally, I don't really care because I never grew up with And to Think I Saw It on Mulberry Street. I never read McGilligan's Pool. I don't think I'm really missing much with those books, so really, it's nothing more but a distraction, people. And overall, if there is a moral to this story, like, whatever you may think about cancel culture, it's not that big of a deal. Especially during this pandemic, there are more bigger issues than trying to combat cancel culture over minor luxuries. And that's really the biggest problem. It's just like with cancel culture, they're just targeting like these pointless luxuries that we can live without. Even if it is the case that those things are canceled, we could actually go and live without them. So really, it's just grow up, people. Like, who cares? It does, like, really, cancel culture is not that big of an issue, or at least the way that you're trying to portray it. Like, it's not a big issue. And if you really think cancel culture is that big of a problem, get some help. Like, I know it sounds bad, but honestly, get some help. No person should constantly be living in paranoia and in fear over the next minor thing that could possibly be canceled. No one should, really. You're just being manipulated by right-wing pundits who try to tell you to think how they want you to think. That's really the big thing. Like, cancel culture is not your enemy. It's the right-wing pundits that are your enemy. It's Ben Shapiro that's your enemy. It's Fox News that's your enemy. It's Republican politicians like Greg Abbott and Ted Cruz that's your enemy. Those are the real problems. But no, you gotta focus on just your freaking children's books that chances are you're not even reading anymore. Seriously, man, grow up. Oh boy. Now that is a lot in my system now. Oh boy. So now let's go and talk about, let's go into the chat wall. And I would like to ask you all, what are your thoughts on the whole Dr. Seuss controversy? What are your thoughts on this? Because I know I've said my piece. I think it's time you could say yours. Alright. It's no big deal, but why can't we leave books, movies, and shows alone? Who cares if it's not appropriate to today's standards now? People must get over it, even if these books were made during a time where it's kind of subject matter wasn't that offensive, like World War II, for example. Instead of covering stuff like censoring or banning, just preserve this stuff and learn from it and what not to do with modern stories. Do not censor history or stories because it's just plain wrong. This is not censorship, though. That's what I've been trying to say. None of this is censorship. This is not being censored. This is not being banned. This is not being canceled. You could still go, like I said, you could still find it. You could still go find it in your library. You could still buy a book on eBay. You could still look it up online and you could read the story and see the images. None of this is being censored whatsoever. That's just a freaking manipulative mentality. There's nothing here that's being canceled. Seriously, man. If you're still taking away that this is still a freaking that Dr. Seuss is being canceled, then I can't help you, man. Like, you're still being like highly manipulative, and you're really the kind of person that still believes in everything you hear on and read on the internet. Let's see. I remember that And to Think I Saw It on Mulberry Street, But I don't remember reading the other Dr. Seuss books. I understand why the company had to not publish the books that depict outdated racism and other stuff then in them. But I don't think it is the end of Dr. Seuss, because there might be some books that Dr. Seuss made might be published to the public. And there is an anime called Barefoot Gen where it shows the history of the bombing of Hiroshima, and it's dark and depressing. Oh yeah, I am fully aware of Barefoot Gen, and yeah, it's a good movie, but it's not a it's not a pleasant film. I'm just gonna say that. While I'm not a Dr. Seuss fan, those books are very outdated and need to go. Also, if you want to know if you want to know racism in the 1900s, look up H.P. Lovecraft's views on other races, because that's one insanity after another. And you want a better example of cancel culture, look up false accusations at VivziePop. Yeah, and I'm just going to say right now, the people who say they're against cancel culture are the same kind of people who would want to use cancel culture for themselves in order to go after people like VivziePop. And that's the sad reality of it. People like these people who claim they hate cancel culture, they don't actually hate cancel culture. They want it to be a conservative privilege. Because it's kind of ironic that these people claim they hate cancel culture, yet they try to do everything they can in order to cancel the 2020 election because Donald Trump didn't win. I'm just saying. And yeah, as for H.P. Lovecraft, now that is an example of a dude who is undeniably racist. Yeah, Dr. Seuss ain't racist, but Lovecraft definitely is. And if you don't believe me, look at the name of his cat, and you will see the yikes on that one. Oh boy. Let's see now. This is just ridiculous. This just proves that these kinds of people don't know what they are talking about. People who say cancel culture is an issue needs mental help. Also, am I the only one who thinks the Texas joke from SpongeBob makes more sense than you think, considering the stuff happens in Texas? You know, I wouldn't really go that far. I know a lot of people have this massive hatred over Texas because of that decision, but really, no, it's not. Like, I'm not gonna go as far as, like, attack Texans and say, like, oh, it's a deep red state and everyone in Texas is stupid. No, it's just that they have incompetent Republican politicians, and it really goes to show why, like, it really is a prominent example of why there should be no Republicans to be allowed to work as politicians in a state like Texas, or in the United States in general, or pretty much around the world, because fuck nationalism, and nationalism needs to die. It needs to be banned. Like, if there's one thing that needs to be canceled, it's freaking nationalism altogether. Alright, let's see what else we got. The only one of these books I've read is If I Ran the Zoo. We're not missing any classic books. Stop saying it's a bad thing. You don't care about these books. I don't care about these books. Who gives a shit? We're still getting the Dr. Seuss classics from generations to enjoy. There's much bigger issues out there. Grow the hell up, you useless sack of disease. And this person actually does, as harsh as this person is, they do bring up a very good point. Because the grand majority, almost everyone who's freaking out about this controversy, they don't care about these books. Because again, no one is out there there's no one out there who is upset about this controversy because of the fact that they can no longer buy the Cat's Quizzer or McElligot's Pool. Let's see now. Where was I? Oh wait, what is this? A lot of these anti-cancel complaints can be reflected in Mr. Enter's problematic video, Everything is Offensive. Everything's offensive! Everything makes me fully triggered at large! Everything's offensive! Anyways, the withdrawal of a few works from for certain reasons isn't taking away Dr. Seuss, Disney, Looney Tunes, or whatever. Or trying to ruin people's enjoyment of them. It's more archiving said works for those who are mentally and intellectually mature enough to handle certain realities, including the ones that all of us are guilty of more than we may ever realize. It's a dark truth right there, dude. Let's see now. I'll go and read two more comments before we jump into the grand finale. I've never even heard of these books, so I don't think I'll be crying myself to sleep over this. I will say this, however, that as crazy as the response is, it isn't as confusing as the whole Potato Head debacle. No joke. I've heard one guy say, Mr. Potato Head was meant to be this big, strong, muscular man. No, he's a leftist. And I just gotta say, it's a potato. That was off topic, sure, but to wrap up, if you're seriously complaining about Dr. Seuss, then in the words of Michael, I don't. The comment unfortunately just stops there. We don't know the words of Michael, but yeah, you do bring up a freaking good point. Like if you're really this upset over, if you're upset over the idea of Dr. Seuss being canceled, you are way too privileged for your own good. Like, you seriously need to go and live in a third world country right now to understand life as we know it, because you're way too comfortable in your own luxuries. Let's see, we got one more comment to go. People often say that Walt Disney was against people's race. Now they learn a bit about the good doctor's true face. It's funny to see so many people get so mad. It just makes them all simply look bad. It makes sense that they would pull these books. People of other races are given such a bad look. But perhaps the greatest thing I've learned while I continue to rhyme is that writing all this just takes too much of my time. I just realized when reading it, was like, oh, you're going with the Dr. Seuss thing. Yeah, oh my god. The fact that you're able to do that on a freaking Twitch stream, like, that is quite impressive. You deserve a freaking cookie there, dude. Yeah. Okay, yeah. The person said that it's in the words of Michael Jordan. So basically, I'll conclude this story by pretty much, the person actually did conclude his comment. It's to repeat the words of Michael Jordan. If you're really that obsessed about cancel culture and worried about cancel culture taking away your things, stop it. Get some help.